Good morning and thank you for coming. As Julia mentioned, my name is Amber Worthington, and today I'll be presenting a paper that I wrote with Roxanne Parrott and John Nussbaum entitled Strategic Message Choices for Enhancing Older Adults' Disclosures about Family Health History. So, the era of personalized medicine is associated with a greater understanding of the role of multiple genes, the environment, and personal behaviors in health and disease. At minimum, a basic understanding of genetics and family health history appears paramount to informed choice and shared decision-making, thus underscoring the importance of family communication. Now, the nature of family health history places older adults, as repositories of this information, in key position to inform their relatives. Although there are many benefits to doing so, these older adults also face many barriers that might demotivate them from engaging in these conversations. So, in the following presentation, I'm first going to start off by talking about family health history and the benefits of conversations about family health history. I'll then discuss barriers that demotivate older adults from engaging in these conversations, and I'll conclude by talking about strategic message choices that can be used to enhance these conversations. So first, family health history. So in this era of genomics, the term family health history has become linguistic and clinical code for efforts to gain clues about the prevention, early diagnosis, and treatment of many common multifactorial conditions. In some families, highly penetrant genes, which have a high likelihood of disease manifestation, are transferred throughout generations. So for example, BRCA1 and BRCA2 genetic mutations, which are associated with ovarian and breast cancers, have a high likelihood of disease manifestation. Fortunately, these types of genes are rare in the general population. Instead, in the majority of families, genetic susceptibility is transferred through many low penetrant genes that interact with the environment and lifestyle factors to increase risk. So for example, family health history is associated with an increased risk in many diseases of public health significance, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, some cancers, osteoporosis, and asthma. So as I mentioned, older adults are repositories of this information. So disclosures begin with these older individuals, and there are many benefits to doing so. First, communication about genetics can serve to facilitate family-wide early prevention and detection behaviors. Additionally, communication about family health history can serve as the impetus for individual members to become more aware of their own genetic risk and act to further protect their health. Further, knowledge of family communication can aid clinicians. So testing for genetic polymorphisms within the general population serves as a poor screening tool. However, testing for these general polymorphisms within individuals who have a family health history of a disease does serve to further refine risk because familial clustering of disease reflects a multifactorial inheritance in which genetic susceptibility is determined by an interaction between multiple genes, the environment, and personal behaviors. So there are these many benefits to engaging in these conversations, and indeed most people acknowledge that it's important to obtain this information. However, most people are not engaging in these conversations, and these are because a lot of the barriers that older adults face when choosing to enter into these conversations. So older adults face many difficulties when deciding how to tell, who to tell, or if to tell their relatives about genetics. So to begin, intergenerational communication is very complex, and it's difficult to have an intergenerational interaction that's competent even within families. Beyond that, there's aspects specific to this context that serve as a barrier. So, for example, older adults face many socio-emotional barriers, including fears, worries, and frustrations, together with perceptions of stigma, or that genetic status carries some sort of stigma, that may demotivate them from engaging in these conversations due to the potential risk for their relatives. Additionally, older adults face many self-perceived individual barriers, including a lack of knowledge and math anxiety, together which contribute to their low self-efficacy to engage in these conversations. So I'm now going to go over these self-perceived individual barriers in a little bit more detail. So the first of which is lack of knowledge. So in order to make these disclosure decisions, older adults first need to be able to make sense of their own genetic information and their own family health history. However, most people have not received, and probably never will receive, formal genetics education, suggesting low public understanding. Instead, the majority of individuals get their information about genetics from the news, entertainment media, and advertising with two persistent problematic patterns. The first is content inaccuracies, and the second is a lack of detail or a bias of omission. So, for example, news stories oftentimes employ phrases like the breast cancer gene. However, this is inaccurate and misleading as there are no disease genes, but rather many common genetic variants that interact to increase risk. Additionally, when translating genetic information for lay audiences, news sources oftentimes employ concrete prescriptive objects in a metaphor like a blueprint or a recipe. However, people can perceive unintended commonalities between the genes and the metaphor, transferring qualities from one entity to the other, thereby impeding understanding. Additionally, beyond news sources, individuals oftentimes gain exposure to content about genetics from the entertainment media. So people oftentimes recall the name of a TV program or a movie such as Gattaca when talking about genes and health. So this low level of knowledge may be particularly prominent for older adults, as research suggests that across 3 different ethnic groups, that's Black, White, and Hispanic, older adults have particularly low levels of genetic understanding. So taken together, this evidence would suggest that older adults have a difficult time making sense of their own genetic risk and their own family health history, and therefore they have low self-efficacy to engage in these conversations. In addition to a lack of knowledge, math anxiety and math stereotypes also decrease older adults' self-efficacy. So math anxiety is the tendency to feel nervous or anxious when solving mathematical problems or manipulating numbers. So family health history affords individuals information about susceptibility to disease. So understanding the potential implications of that requires an understanding of math, particularly these probabilities and these health statistics. So when an individual feels anxious about using math, engaging in these conversations is likely to be an uncomfortable experience. Additionally, both older and younger individuals are aware that older adults are stereotyped as being less capable than younger individuals, and math incompetence is one aspect of that stereotype. So stereotype activation affects a wide range of cognitive abilities consistent with that stereotype, as these situations increase anxiety. So as a result, there's a significant risk that these negative stereotypic expectations about older adults' math abilities can become a self-fulfilling prophecy as a result of stereotype threat. So this has particular implications for the intergenerational communication context, such as when an older adult is disclosing information to a younger relative, as research suggests that when older adults have either an experienced or imagined positive intergenerational interaction, it prevents this stereotype activation and preserves their ability to use math. However, when these interactions are perceived to be negative, it increases this negative stereotypic expectations and decreases older adults' abilities to do math or to engage in these conversations about math. So taken together, this math anxiety and this potential for these negative stereotypic expectations to impact their ability to engage in these conversations contributes to their low self-efficacy. So I've talked about these different barriers, including socio-emotional barriers and self-perceived individual barriers, and I'm now going to turn to strategic message choices that can be used to enhance older adults' disclosures. So the communication discipline has long been interested in the role of emotions in persuasion, as emotions are thought to motivate people to action. So fear appeals, or messages designed to elicit fear, have been a focal point for several decades, with theoretical frameworks ranging from protection motivation theory to the extended parallel processing model. Now, however, although fear appeals are commonly used, it's likely to be inappropriate and ineffective in this context for several reasons. First, a recent meta-analysis in 2012 found that, consistent with the extended parallel processing model, under situations of low self-efficacy, heightened perceptions of threat or threatening information can serve a health-defeating behavior or serves as boomerang effect. So older adults who have low self-efficacy in this context, it's unlikely to be effective to scare them unless you're positive that the intervention or the message will increase their self-efficacy, which is not always a given. Additionally, older adults are more likely to attend to and remember positive information as opposed to negative information. So this idea draws from socio-emotional selectivity theory, which posits that individuals have the same sets of goals throughout their lifespan, but the relative weighting or the relative importance of these goals changes as an individual becomes more cognizant of the approaching end of life. So older adults who are more aware that the end of life is approaching have more emotionally meaningful goals and seek out more positive interactions, positive relationships, and positive information. I saw a presentation just yesterday that also found that older adults are more likely to like calm as opposed to arousing advertising messages, which also sorts of goes along with this same idea. So, and additionally, recall that socio-emotional barriers like fears, worries, and frustrations contribute to their low self-efficacy, so increasing that fear is unlikely to be effective. And negative stereotypic expectations or perceptions that this interaction might go negatively is unlikely to be effective because of these math stereotypes. So, fear appeals are unlikely to be effective, and instead we turned to theoretical developments in persuasive hope theory. So, hope within persuasive hope theory is defined as a positively balanced, discrete emotion that involves appraisals of a stimulus as novel and relevant, and includes assessments of importance, possibility, future expectation, and goal congruence. So, in order to experience hope, an individual must appraise that a future outcome is important to them. It has to be possible, but not certain. It also has to be occurring in the future, not already happened. If it was certain or if it had already happened, an individual would feel happiness or relief, not hope. Additionally, the individual has to perceive that that future outcome is going to be congruent with their goals to achieve a desired outcome or to avoid an undesired outcome. So hope appeals involve eliciting this emotion of hope and then followed up by an efficacy component. So the individual has to feel that the recommended action will be effective at achieving that future outcome or response efficacy, and they also have to believe that they are able to perform that outcome, which is self-efficacy. So persuasive hope theory posits that the feeling of hope, when coupled with efficacy, motivates individuals to action to achieve that future outcome. So these hope appeals can therefore be used to frame older adults' disclosures about family health history as a means to create a positive future vision. More specifically, these hope appeals can create a positive future vision for the older adults' relatives, so for their children and for their grandchildren. So I'm making a distinction here between a self-appeal and an other appeal. So a self-appeal is one that if you do this action, it benefits you, and an other appeal is one that if you do this action, it benefits others. So it may be particularly effective for older adults to frame it such that their action will benefit others, that is their children or their grandchildren, based on this idea of generativity. So generativity was a term that was introduced in the 1950s and defined as a concern for guiding or providing for the next generation. So it was originally introduced as a midlife phenomenon, but later research extended generative actions to also be a part of successful aging. So older adults may have this particular desire to give back to the next generation, so to give back to their children and their grandchildren, so framing it as if their action, their disclosures of family health history are benefiting the health of their children and grandchildren is likely to be the most effective. So I'll now turn to providing a few specific examples of what different aspects of this hope appeal might look like. So on the right, on your left, you have examples of what would be a good hope appeal. On the right, a not so effective hope appeal. So your children and your grandchildren would be greatly affected. Disclosing this information is very important for them. It will make their future much better. So this is involving those assessments of importance, of future expectation, and of goal congruence. So in addition to eliciting that hope, recall also that there has to be an efficacy component. So they have to have response efficacy, so it's very likely that your disclosing of this information will be effective at providing a more hopeful, healthy future for your relatives. And it also has to have a very potent self-efficacy component. So there's not necessarily that risk and fear appeals of that boomerang effect in these hope appeals, but you still need to make sure that you increase this self-efficacy. So I'm drawing on some of Bandura's work where he talks about vicarious experiences as being one way to increase self-efficacy, as well as intergroup communication, such that if an older adult reads a message with an intra-group comparison, such that other older individuals have successfully engaged in these conversations, they've gone well, they've gone positively, it's likely to increase that self-efficacy. Whereas if the message contains information about younger individuals or it's more of an intergroup comparison, then it's unlikely to be as effective. So today I've talked about family health history and the need for more strategic efforts targeted towards older adults to enhance their disclosures and conversations about family health history. These targeted efforts should focus on older adults' preference for positive information, their low self-efficacy, and their desire for generative actions. Persuasive hope theory appears to be one theoretical framework that's useful for doing so, and future empirical work should examine these utilities of these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. This was a really